All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. Today, as we finished up Egypt yesterday, we will move on to India, which again is fascinating. And it's still kind of new to this course because this course, when I first started teaching it, it was a little more Western oriented. And so we didn't really deal with China or with India, but we're going to deal with those places because they're important, right? Billions of people come from those two countries, and so we're going to talk about them. So, without further ado, I'm going to say good morning to Fadzwa and to Kayla. Hello, hello. And then we're going to jump in, okay? Now, if I were to ask you, and I am asking you, what do you know about India? What's that? It's what?
MSG.
They're also polytheistic.
MSG? Like in the food?
Yeah.
Okay.
The MSG is.
I thought it was like Chinese food that was more known for MSG. Maybe that's just here.
They have different religions.
Right.
Buddhist.
So there's
Lots of religions.
there's
Because
yeah.
of the population, I think.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of people in India. There's a bunch of different religions. Some of those religions are polytheistic, like Felicia points out. That is true. What else do we know?
Has a lot of spices.
That's all.
Lot of spices. Yeah.
One of the most populated countries.
Yeah, it's one of the most populous countries in the world. Yeah. What else do we know?
They speak a lot of languages.
Yeah, it's religiously diverse, but it's also ethnically and language diverse as well. What else? Oh yeah, the Taj Mahal is there, right? The famous mausoleum of what's some Muslim ruler who buried his wife there. I forget their names, right? Shah Jahan is his name, right? Shah Jahan's wife Mumtaz is buried at the Taj Mahal.
You mean Taj Mahal?
Yeah.
You know the engineer of, you say Taj Mahal is Iranian, and because of that, the Indians made a place like Taj Mahal in Tehran.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. What's that?
He's from India.
Who's that?
Like, I don't know.
Those are just Indian people?
He's an Indian people, but he can like French stuff.
Okay. All
We
right.
have lots of like famous people like Shah Rukh Khan.
Yeah, there's lots of famous people from India for sure. Anything else? They use what? They use rupees, right? That's the currency today. Sorry, what? Movies? Yeah, India has a pretty thriving film industry, right? Bollywood, as they call it. Music, yeah. Their films have lots of music, lots of dancing, right?
Ah, yeah.
You wanna watch a movie?
What's that?
Are you gonna watch a movie? They're like 7 hours long.
Oh, then no.
I mean, there's one
You can watch it on your own time if you want. No, you can't watch a 7-hour movie.
Some of them have ultranational power.
Some of them have what?
They're like ultranational power.
I guess there are some kind of ultranationalist currents in India, as there are probably in most countries, I would say, yeah. Okay, that's a good start. It's also good because we're going to again go back to the beginning of India, right? We're going to kind of see where India comes from originally, right? In terms of their culture and language and religion and all of that stuff. We're going to see the development of that. Good morning. So, again, just these are the things that we'll try to pay attention to as we go through this unit. So, here is Indian subcontinent, right? And so to the north there, you can see mountain ranges in terms of the Himalayas, right? They're all along that northern border of India. And India as well is a place that's very environmentally diverse, right? So It's got jungle, it's got open plains, it's got mountains, it's got all kinds of different environments in it. So yeah, it's linguistically and religiously and ethnically diverse, but it's also diverse in terms of its physical environment. But the place where Indian civilization kind of gets going is right there in that pink area. And so in that pink area, you'll find the Indus River Valley. And so again, we're going to see a similar kind of situation as we saw in Mesopotamia and Egypt with a river valley civilization, right? That river valley allows people to irrigate their crops, to practice intensive agriculture, and start building a more complicated form of social cooperation, right? So what happened in Mesopotamia, what happened in Egypt, a similar thing is going to happen here in what's now kind of Western India and Pakistan, okay? Now, as you can see, there's lots of different cities or city-states that popped up in this region of the world. Again, it's roughly around the same time as some of the Mesopotamian city-states and some of the Egyptian cities are occurring, although there's recent archaeological evidence to suggest that the Indus River Valley civilization might actually go back further. So this one might be the first civilization on Earth, depending on what archaeological dates you believe, okay? But as you can see, there's lots of different settlements and different cities. The biggest ones there are Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. Those are the biggest cities, and I'll show you some pictures of what those look like or might have looked like. So again, before civilization develops here, we have evidence of people, doing some simple farming, right? Growing wheat, living in these sort of brick dwellings, keeping animals like sheep and goats and cows and things like that. Kind of very simple agriculture. But then we have the creation of a more, I guess, elaborate civilization a little bit later, okay? Now, some of the things that kind of stand out from this civilization, number one, their writing system, which I'll show you. But as kind of a spoiler alert, we don't actually know how to read their writing. And so the amount we're going to be able to sort of know about these people is much more limited than in Mesopotamia and in Egypt, right? Because we can read what those people wrote, and so we know, well, look at Ka and Kar and Merit, right? Look how much we knew about them. These people, you'll see, we don't really know a lot about because we just can't read what they wrote. But they did build, very kind of large cities with streets and buildings. Their sewage system is quite something, which I'll show you very shortly. And so, again, this is kind of the first Indian civilization. But as I say, unfortunately, we don't know a huge amount about it. So let me show you some things here. So this, I believe, is Mohenjo-Daro. So one of the main cities of the Indus River Valley civilization. As you can see, lots of mud brick buildings. There's kind of a big building up there on the ridge. If you look at it, oh yeah, there's another picture of it too. Again, lots of the upper parts of the walls have either fallen down or people have stolen those bricks to build something else, which also happens a lot with ancient cities. People come along later and borrow bricks to use for something else, and they kind of strip the city down. The other thing we see is that this is a civilization that's very constant for its through its lifespan, I guess, if you will. And so often that'll suggest that you have someone in central control, right? Somebody is in charge, making sure that things always get done the same way, right? And so we see that the cities are kind of laid out very similarly. We see some standardized weights and measures, just like the Egyptians had the cubit. The Indus River civilization had their own measurement system, right? So that suggests somebody is in charge to make sure everyone's using the same thing, right? And we also find a script, right? Some sort of writing system. And we know it from these stamp seals. And again, often you'll find these in ancient civilizations as a way of people signing things, right? If you're signing a document, or if you made this clay pot and you want to say that this is yours, you stamp it with a seal, right? You press it into the clay and it leaves an impression. And I'll show you some of those very shortly. Oh yeah, so very shortly, here's one of them. So you can see a very simple seal, right? So this belonged to someone. If they were going to sign a document or something, they could press it into the clay and leave an imprint of this. Obviously, you can see a cow. Yeah.
Do they worship for cow?
Well, this is the thing, right? Is that we know in modern day India, cows have a sacred significance, right? Because we can't read any of the writing, we really don't know. So, is this a holy cow? Haha, holy cow. Is this a holy cow? Is this just some guy's cow? Who knows, right? It's hard, and this is where the not being able to learn the writing is difficult, because we just don't know. It might be one or the other, right? It might be the cow god, or it might just be some cow, right? We don't know. You can see some writing up at the top, right? Which again, we don't really know how to read yet. It's very interesting looking. That's really all I can say about it. Here's another one. I believe this one is in a roll though, so you kind of roll it onto the clay. But again, you can see another cow. So cows are clearly significant in some way, right? Could be in a religious way, could just be in a subsistence way, right? People rely on cows to eat and live, right? This is another very interesting seal that comes out of the Indus River Valley. There's kind of we're not really sure who this guy is, right? He seems to be sitting in kind of a lotus, kind of cross-legged pose, maybe. He seems to have a fancy hat, or maybe horns on his head. It's kind of hard to tell what's going on. There's I think a rhino on one side and a tiger on the other. Some elephants up top. Who knows, right? Is he a god? Is he a king? Is he a spiritual leader? Is he just some guy who likes animals? Hard to know,
Maybe
right?
What?
Maybe what?
Idol. It's idol.
Oh.
It's the god. That's some of them made by gold.
Could be, right? As I say, that's the difficult part, is this we just don't know what we're looking at, right? It could be any of those things. So again, we have some evidence that there was some sort of central authority, right? Like some sort of a king or ruler that was keeping things consistent, insisting on certain measurements, insisting on certain ways of laying out the city. Again, we don't really know much more beyond that, right? Somebody was in charge and making people do things the same way. It's not much, right? Again, we have these two big cities, but not quite as big as some of the ones in Mesopotamia, right? We said that Uruk had, good morning, Uruk in Mesopotamia might have had up to 800,000 people at one point, right? So the cities here are a little bit smaller, but again, you can see there, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit, you can see kind of some form of planning, right? So there's a big main street running up. This is Harappa here. You can see a big main street running up the side there, and lots of little smaller alleyways, right? And passages, different buildings, and a very similar kind of idea to the village we saw in Egypt, right? Where people kind of economize on their production by using their neighbor's wall, right? So, one person builds a house, and instead of you building 4 walls to your house, you kind of just attach it to your neighbor's, and then you only have to build 3 walls, right? And the next person only has to build 2 walls, and it's becomes very economical to build that way. And you can see every building is kind of, stuck to the other one. just to kind of save effort. But yeah, lots of little buildings and rooms. Again, it's kind of hard to know exactly what's going on here. Again, we can't read anything, so we're not sure what was what, right? So here's an aerial view, which can help you see what's going on as well. Again, it's pretty interesting and impressive, but it's kind of hard to know what you're looking at, right? Archaeologists would have a better idea of what they're looking at, but for our purposes, yeah. And here's Mohenjo-Daro, but you can see it's a very similar thing, right? There's this big main avenue kind of running up kind of north-south, and then there's lots of other smaller buildings and rooms and sort of streets and alleyways attached to it, right? Yeah, so Mohenjo-Daro there, I think. This is kind of interesting and maybe worth pointing out. This is obviously an artist's idea of what parts of this city might have looked like. But interestingly, they had a really good sanitation system. And so from people's houses, they built channels that sort of carried the wastewater out and then into kind of a ditch in the street. And then they overlaid that ditch with stone. So they actually had sewers in this city, really the first example of a sewage system anywhere in the world, right? You won't see another sewage system like this until you get to Rome. And Rome is thousands of years later, right? So they have a very impressive sewage system, which again you won't see. I know sewage doesn't sound incredibly exciting, but when you've got thousands of people living in one place, you really need to find a way to, get people clean water and to get rid of all of their waste, right? And here in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa and some other places, they actually figure out a way to efficiently do that, right? They build a sewer system in their city, which is, again, super impressive and something that, you won't see again until the Roman Republic.
Do they have codes for the water, or anybody can take from the water?
Probably anyone can take from the water. Usually these things are, almost like the canals, right? Is that it's something that everybody has to cooperate to build and maintain, and so everybody gets to partake of it, usually, depending on the situation. But yeah, everybody who lived in the city would have had a way to get their wastewater out of their house, and they probably would have had some way to access fresh water, right? I don't think the fresh water would have come into their house, but they would have been able to fill up a jug of fresh water somewhere nearby, right? So, which again, for the ancient world is impressive, right? Yeah, so some other pictures here of Harappa or Mohenjo-Daro, just to give you an idea of what this looked like. And here we have kind of an artist's imagining of what a house would have looked like in this period. And so you can see here these small houses with kind of a central open courtyard, right? And some stairs to a second level, or maybe even a rooftop patio, which you have to pay extra for nowadays. But in Mohenjo-Daro, I guess everybody had them. And yeah, you can see some very simple sleeping furniture there, some people weaving some baskets, tending to some children, maybe playing some games in the little courtyard. And you can see a little bathroom. You see in the bottom left, that guy's, getting some reading done, right? And so, again, it seems kind of interesting, but yeah, that having a bathroom in your house is something that, most civilizations didn't have, and, you won't see it again for thousands of years, really. So, how do we know what? You kind of have to intuit it, right? But, I think what you would find is that you would find a place to sit with a hole, and the hole leads into the sewage system, right? So I think you would put two and two together there. But yeah, you know, indoor bathrooms, a luxury that most people don't have. So here we have a city that has this kind of, you know, we have a lot of architecture, right? A lot of building. We have some sort of central authority kind of organizing the economy. We have a sewage system, which again takes some sort of central authority to design and build and maintain. And so, yeah, we have that happening here in this part of the world, again, at the same time as Mesopotamia and Egypt. Yeah. Oh yeah, so you can kind of see what's going on here. Pretty impressive, right? And so you can see all of these are basically pipes, right, that they've built into the ground, and then you just overlay them with larger stones, and you've got, you know, you've got a pipe, you've got a sewer pipe under the sidewalk. Incredible, right? Incredible. So again, we know this is an agricultural community, right? They're growing some rice, they're growing some wheat, but they're also growing some other naturally occurring vegetables too, right? So you can see lentils and sesames and dates. Of course, you can grow dates in Mesopotamia as well. We see them keeping various types of animals, right? Like cattle and sheep and goats. Dogs are around, of course, and we didn't talk about dogs. We didn't talk about dogs too much, but dogs were probably domesticated at least 30,000 years ago. So they've been man's best friend, if you will, for quite a long time. But yeah, the Indus River Valley people would have had dogs as well. They use elephants and buffalo as kind of work animals, which is also very impressive. And so, yeah, here we have kind of a complex civilization with multiple kinds of animals and crops that they're using, and producing lots of different materials that they would use to, you know, to create tools and clothing and to trade with others, right? So again, I know this sounds very general, but just don't know. We don't know that much, right? Oh yeah, this was interesting as well. We also have some evidence of trade between these two civilizations. So even though Mesopotamia and the Indus River Valley are thousands of kilometers away from each other, there were connections between them. These two civilizations knew that the other one existed, and they did some trading, right? At the very least, there were messengers going back and forth, because as you can see here, oh, that's weird. What kind of weird typo is that? Yeah, we found those cylinder seals from the Indus River. We found them in Mesopotamia, and Mesopotamian texts mention this land, right? So again, these people knew each other and were in contact with each other. Globalization, it starts here, right? Thousands of years ago. Let me just remind myself what this one says. Oh yeah, metal and semi-precious stones. Yeah, so it seems like here in Indus River Valley, based on what we found and based on what occurs naturally, the civilization was trading with lots of people outside of it, right? So again, people aren't just kind of living in their civilization and have no idea what's going on in the land around them. They're in contact with people, right? They know about people living in distant lands, right? Even thousands of kilometers away. And people are moving between these two civilizations as well, right? So again, you've got the very beginnings of trade and globalization happening, if you will. Yeah, so again, we have a writing system here. Clearly it was used by this culture, but we still don't really know what to do with it, right? And again, some archaeologists have suggested that, you know, nowadays in India there is as part of religious practice, there's a focus on bathing, right? So you wash yourself as kind of a ritual purification. And based on some of the things we see in Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, like the sewage system, and there's a big pool. It looks like a big pool in Mohenjo-Daro. Some archaeologists said, oh, well, maybe, there's a focus on purification through bathing as well, right? So it's, again, it's hard to know, right? Hard to know. So yeah, here we see some of their writing here and a cylinder seal. I've showed you these before. This is also another interesting artifact from, I think he's from Harappa. Again, he's a sculpture. He's called the Priest King. I think that's what we've called him. We don't know who he is. We don't know if he's a priest or a king or just some handsome dude who used to live in Harappa. We're not really sure who he is. And again, that's what's kind of frustrating about not being able to read, right? You have these things, but you don't know what their significance is. You don't know what they mean. And so he's pretty cool, thousands of years old. We don't really know. Is he a man? Is he a god? Who is he? Don't know. So, the Indus River civilization here is around for about 1,000 years, okay? So, it appears and sort of grows in complexity just like Egypt and Mesopotamia do. But then it kind of disappears. People kind of abandon the cities and seem to kind of disappear into the land surrounding it. And again, there's a few theories about what's going on at that time, and we'll get to that shortly. But one of the things that happens around the same time is the arrival of these Aryan people, okay? And so these are not Aryan people like Hitler talked about, right? Hitler was big on his Aryan race. This has nothing to do with that. These Aryan people are kind of from Central Asia. And so they're from a land to the west of India. And they kind of find their way into northern India kind of around this period, around 1800 BCE or around 3,800 years ago. So just around the time that that the Indus River Valley civilization is kind of disappearing, or at least the people are leaving the cities, in come these Aryan people. And they're people that are kind of from the open plains. They ride horses. I believe they herd cows, if I remember. And again, they kind of enter this period. We're not sure if the Aryans kind of drive out the people from the Indus River Valley, or if there's climate change that caused the river to move, and so people just had to abandon their cities because the rivers wouldn't irrigate their crops anymore, and then the Aryans just happened to show up later. We can talk about that a bit later, but either way, the civilization, the Indus River Valley civilization, kind of declines and disappears, and then these Aryan people start to come in from the northwest, okay? And so that kind of brings us to, it almost brings us something. These people are going to be called the Vedic Aryans, okay? So let me just see what I said here. Right. We don't know much about these people. They didn't really leave much behind in terms of their archaeology. Most of what we know about them comes from their religious texts. And so they had hymns that they would kind of sing to the gods, and later these things will be written down, right? At first, the Vedas will just be passed on orally, right, from one generation to another. Eventually, they'll be written down, and once they are, then we have some kind of written record that we can actually read, and we can read these very old religious texts. And again, based on what they say, that kind of tells us something about the Aryan culture that comes in from the West, okay? So we kind of have, I guess, a bit of a fusion, right? We have these Indus River Valley people who live in cities with sanitation and farming. They have a writing system we don't understand, and then they kind of abandon their cities. They kind of move out into other areas, and then these Aryans come in, and we know a little bit about them through their religious texts, right? And so the very beginning of Indian civilization is going to be kind of a merger between those two, right? The original Indus River Valley people, wherever they go or whatever they were like, and these Aryans who kind of come in later and mix with the Indus River Valley people. So that brings us to this. So I've got a little section here for you to read. It talks about who these Aryans were, where they came from, and what some of their religious hymns tell us about who they were. Okay? And again, writing is important, and so this is kind of our entry point into ancient Indian history, because this is the first point where we have something written down and we can start to learn about who the Aryans were and who they believed in and what they thought was important. Okay? So, I will turn you loose to read this section and answer these questions. I'm going to put some time on the clock, say 13 minutes, and then we can talk about these questions, okay? All right, let's do it. Sorry, that's really loud. Let's do it. The long Vedic age. 73. There we go. Yes.
Do you know what is different between like Indo-Aryans and you know the Aryans?
I'm not sure that I
You
know.
they come at first they come to like a place is now we say Middle East. They come and they invent Middle East and they get to three parts.
I'm not sure I know too much about that. Like I think in this case the Aryans are kind of generally understood to be people from Central Asia, but
Oh, it's meaning that it's Aryans, not Aryan.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're
In
asking.
country we say like Aryans, but here it's Aryan.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'll do some research here.
Because our name is come from this.
Right. Let me just do some research here. Say again?
The origins of the Aryan people and the Indo-European hypothesis.
Yeah. Where do they come from?
There's one part where it says go to this page, there's another chapter reading about it.
Oh, does it? Let me see what you found. I didn't put the link in there.
No, I don't know. This is like page 676.
Oh yeah. No, that's okay. They're talking about kind of they're kind of talking about linguistic relationships, which is a little bit different. So yeah, that's okay. Don't go that far.
They were saying.
Okay. So, from what I've just read, and it might not be correct, but yeah, the term Arya seems to be quite old, maybe even going back further than the Sanskrit language, and so the people in kind of Central Asia may have had this term in their language, and they used it in various ways. So, the Indo-Aryans here kind of used it to describe themselves, and it seems like other groups in Central Asia use that term to describe themselves as well, right? And it found its way eventually into the name of Iran, right?
Yeah,
Coming
now
from,
I check it in my phone.
yeah, kind of interesting, hey?
I know that.
Yeah. Do you need a couple more minutes, maybe?
Yeah.
Couple more minutes? Okay. There we go. 3 more minutes. Okay, good people. Let's answer some questions here. So number one, who are these Indo-Aryans? Where do they come from?
They come from the Central Asia.
Right?
South Asia.
Right? So they come from Central Asia? Yeah, so we're not sure exactly where they're from. They're a people that seem to move around, but they find their way through the mountains of what's now Afghanistan and Pakistan and find their way into kind of northern India. Yeah, maybe I'll save that question for a little bit later. Or yeah, no, I guess this is question two. What do we kind of know about the culture of these Indo-Aryans based on the Rig Veda?
The Rig Veda, like the first of four Vedas, consists of 1028 hymns
Right?
addressed to the Vedic people's pantheon of gods. Like, but it wasn't actually written down until after 500 BCE.
Okay. So I know you can read, but tell me in your own words. I'm glad you can read, but
So like it's orally composed and translated to Aryan's people.
okay. So let's pull what we've learned about Aryan culture or Indo-Aryan culture from that little section, right? We know there's a pantheon of gods, right? So we know that they're polytheistic, which you pointed out of kind of modern India today. We know that. We know they're singing hymns to the gods. What else do we know about their culture and their way of life from the Rig Veda? They're what? They're pastoralists. Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah, they rely on domesticated animals for their livelihood, right? They exist with herds of animals. What type of animal? Cows, right? They seem to be big into cows. What else do we know about Indo-Aryans? Yeah, they spoke Sanskrit, right, which is an earlier form. Well, actually, they show you in the text, right? On the next page, there's kind of a boy, that's really hard to see. But it's kind of it's a type of language that is related to many other Proto-Indo-European languages, right? But it's a precursor to some of the modern languages from the Indian subcontinent today, right? But they speak an older version of that, Sanskrit. What else do we know about them?
They settled along the hills and plains of the upper reaches of the Indus River and its tributaries.
Yeah, they kind of found their way through the upper reaches of the Indus River, and we know that because they kind of mention some of these things in the hymns, right? That talk about how they found their way into this part of the world, right? What else do we know about them? Their name means no. Okay. So they use the term Aryan to mean noble or respected. So they thought they were noble people, which I think most people think they are, but still, yeah, we know that. Maybe I'll move on to number 3 here. What do we know about their family and social structure?
Like father is the leader and the son is the host banana. Oh, and the son were expected to bring honor through success in battle and sacrifice for the well-being of their families.
Right. So we have a patriarchy here, if you will, right? So have you heard the term patriarchy before? Yeah. Comes from a Greek term, patris for father and archon for ruler, right? Patris archon, patriarchy, father, ruler, right? So here we have a situation where men are kind of in charge and have the power, right, in this society. Sons are very important, right, because they go on to take care of the father and to, win glory for the family. What else do we learn?
The son also inherited the property and family.
Right? So you inherit things from the father, right? So wealth or cattle or whatever it is gets passed down from generation to generation through the male line, right? From father to son. That's important. What else?
Women also had choice in marriage and could remarry.
Right. So we have some inequality in this society, right? Men have the power, but women, are not totally powerless. They can enter into marriages and they can own property, did you say?
Could remarry.
Oh, and they could remarry, right? Okay, that's important as well. What else do we learn about social structure here? Right. So there were families, and those families belonged to a larger clan, right? A clan that was full of multiple families, and then that belonged to a larger tribe, right? In terms of multiple clans. Again, the Indo-Europeans probably, or Indo-Aryans would have called them different things, right? But the term clan and tribe are kind of anthropological terms, and they get used for every culture. But yeah, we have some kind of greater organization to these people, right? And who do they call the head of the tribe, or the head of the chief? What do they call him? Raja, right? And Raja is still a word that's used in India today, right? And in the Jungle Book, right? Isn't there a Raja in the Jungle Book? What is he? Is he the tiger? I thought Shere Khan was the tiger, or are there two tigers? Anyway, still a term that's used in India today, right? Coming all the way from these Indo-Aryans 3,800 years ago. Well, I think it means king currently, but in the Jungle Book? Yeah, well, for sure. Yeah, the lion, it's kind of interesting, right? The lion is kind of associated with kingship in a lot of different cultures and contexts, right? He's king of the jungle for a lot of different groups of people. Okay, and what does the Rig Veda tell us about the religion of Indo-Aryans?
That universe was composed of the sky, earth, and another world.
Right. So the existence or our universe is divided up into three things, right? The sky and the land and the underworld. That's good. Yeah, there were lots of kind of gods and demons, right? And they were all responsible for various things, sometimes helping humans and blessing them, and sometimes causing them trouble and things like that, right? So lots of little spirits and demons and things helping or hurting, humanity, right? That's good. What else? What's that? They had how many gods? 3? 33. Oh yeah, they did have 33, right? Although there might have been more, but still, yeah, they mentioned 33. Do we hear the names of any of these?
Is it Agni?
Yeah, well, it's both of those, right? So what's Agni's function? Or what's Agni the god of?
God of fire and household.
Right. So Agni is the god of fire and the household, and then who's our other main god? Indra, right? What's Indra's function? He's what? Yeah, god of. Yeah, he's the god of war. He's the god of rain. He's a great warrior, but also a protector of the weak, right? So kind of a very heroic figure, it sounds like. Anything else we hear about Indo-Aryan religion? Say that one more time. Yeah. Kang's got an important point here because, one of the things that we can really learn about cultures is what they ask the gods for is the things that they value, right? When people say, "Oh dear God, please give me this," that kind of tells you what's important to that culture, right? So what are the Indo-Aryans asking the gods for? Rain. What's that? Friends? Yeah. Wealth. Yeah. Fame, right? So a good, well, I don't know about a good reputation, but a reputation. Sons, right? They want a good harvest. So these things tell us what's important for this culture, right? In terms of their cattle, their agriculture, they want wealth and fame, but they also want lots of sons because that's a prestigious thing to have, right? And so, yeah, we can tell a little bit about these people by what they're asking the gods for, right? All right, you want to take a little break? Yeah, we've been working very hard, haven't we? Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back in 10, okay? All right, ready, people? Okay. So, I'm going to hand back your quizzes here, and I'm just going to make sure I actually have them in my spreadsheet, because if I don't, that would be bad. And I do. Okay. So let me hand these back, and then we will review them, okay? So, first thing, there you are. And Lex are behind here. Go. And Yo-Yo's over here. Oh yeah. That is you, yes? Sorry, he's right over here. It's bad, don't give it to you?
I want to see yours first.
Here.
I want you to get
How can we see overall in
Sorry, say again?
How can we see overall the score?
11.
It's at the
Yes!
9.5. Okay.
I just did 4 points.
Okay, so let's review this very quickly, okay, if we can. So, number one, 2 people who were living in Mesopotamia when civilization was developing. Who are they?
Akkadians and Sumerians.
Yes, Akkadians and Sumerians. Good.
I don't know how to spell Akkadian, so just give it up.
What's that?
I didn't even try to spell Akkadian.
Okay.
I just give it up.
Excuse me, is it like Babylonians and Sumerians?
Sumerians and Akkadians.
Akkadian or Babylonian?
Akkadians. Okay. Number 2, who is Oannes?
The half fish, half god.
Half fish, half man, god,
And
or
give
demigod, or whatever.
Give advice to people how to agriculture and pastoral.
Yeah, came out of the sea in ancient Sumeria, taught people how to do agriculture and carpentry and all kinds of civilization-like tasks, right? In the TED Talk, we talked about this yesterday, I think, but in the TED Talk, Jonathan Gottschall said, what happens when humans engage with story?
They start to pass it down to other people.
They do pass it down to other people.
To imagine better.
They emphasize what's going on.
They do what?
Emphasize like they think they're there, like the feelings is the same.
Yeah, they empathize, right? So they actually feel the same things as the characters feel on screen. So that was one version of the answer that I took. The other version, what was that? Yeah, so the idea that humans are kind of driven to impose a story structure on their experience, right? When they see something, they try to put it into some sort of a story in order to understand it, right? And, in a similar way, we haven't talked a lot about this, but ancient cultures do the same thing, right? What is this world? Well, here's the story, right? First there was the sky, and then it created this god, and then this god married his sister, and they had sex, and then they had a bunch of other gods, and it's a story, right? They try to conceptualize existence as a story, right? So, yeah, 2 things. Either the empathetic thing, where you feel the same thing as the people in the story, or people's kind of nature to be, sorry, I'm not saying this right. People are driven to kind of impose a story structure on their experience. Okay? One of those 2 is good. Let's see. 3 characteristics of myth.
Yeah, the story that comes from generation to generation.
Right? They're passed down generation to generation.
Fantastic heroes, like
Usually from
heroes
this
are
semester.
wonderful from
Yeah.
story.
Something fantastic, right? Something beyond usual experience, whether it's gods or demons or superpowers or whatever, or magic, whatever it is. And then the third thing?
You can learn a mirror.
Yeah, there's a moral or a lesson to this story, right? There's something that we are supposed to learn. Good. This one, the hero's journey. What I really wanted to ask you was, what's the hero's journey and what's the significance if this idea is true? But I didn't really ask that. So instead of being out of 2 marks, I just made it out of 1 mark. If you got 2, then you get a little bonus out of that. If you got 1, then it's okay. But I wanted to ask you a little more, and I just didn't ask it. So that's my fault. But what's the hero's journey?
Common hero storyline where it starts with them leaving the familiar world, then start to navigate the unfamiliar world, and then they return to their familiar world.
Yeah, so it's kind of a common hero story where they leave home, they set out on a quest to do something or to find something. They meet some friends out there and advisors. They are challenged. Hopefully they gain something, they get some sort of reward, and then they return home with that reward, right?
And can you say like the hero journey is about Gilgamesh?
Gilgamesh is a hero's journey, but the hero's journey is not Gilgamesh, right? It's more, it's bigger than that. And so if you got 2 on this one, what did you say?
Here, like I write about the story of Gilgamesh and what's wrong with it, and I say it's like a hero journey, and I get 0 from 2.
Well, yeah, because that's not the hero's journey. That's the Gilgamesh story. But what's the significance of the hero's journey?
It's a kind of story that has a beginning with departure,
Yeah.
and then a series of important events,
Yeah.
and then return.
And what?
Like the return home.
Yeah. Here's what it was. What I wanted to ask, and that some people kind of mentioned, was the idea that, this type of story shows up in multiple cultures, right? It shows up in cultures all around the world. And again, the details change, the characters change, but the structure seems to be told over and over again, right? Which is really interesting, right? There's something that's very human about this story, right? That all cultures tell some version of it, right? Even our modern culture today, there's lots of movies and books that follow the same hero's journey, right? We're still telling the same story as Gilgamesh, right? We're still telling that story just in a different way, right? And so, I think that says something about humans and their experience of the world, right? That they continually tell the same story. So I was looking for something like that, right? That many cultures seem to tell this story, but with different details. And I didn't really ask that, so I didn't really, I didn't take a mark off if you didn't get it because I didn't ask it, so that's not fair. But I wanted to ask that.
And another, can I say something?
What's that?
In that I don't know like the meaning of the question, and because of that I give a wrong answer.
Okay.
So we should have
And we can know.
Yeah, if you got yeah, so for that question, if you got 1, then it's 1 out of 1. Okay? If you got,
What about like 0?
well, then it's 0. Okay, and the last one was actually done really well. What was Toynbee's stimulus and response idea?
It's like when they use the land and like develop it into other things. The land is a stimulus, and their response is like to use it as an agriculture field. Yeah.
Okay. There's a little bit more to that though. A little bit more.
How they use clay and develop it into like a place to write something.
No, it's not about clay. What's it about?
How, because of the different materials people have, they respond differently.
Say that one more time.
Like different cultures are different because they have different materials.
Okay. So cultures develop differently based on the environment, right? How the environment kind of forces them to adapt, right? And I think the other piece to this was the idea that if you had an environment that was kind of too easy to live in, right? There was so much food available, people really wouldn't cooperate in a sophisticated way because they didn't have to, right? It was easy. If the environment's too harsh and there's no resources, people can't exist at all. It's too difficult. But if you're kind of in the middle where it's a little challenging, people have to cooperate and work together in order to survive, right? And that's where you get social organization and civilization, where people can't just, they can't exist on their own and just do whatever they want, but they can survive if they work together, right? So the environment kind of stimulates people, right? It gets them to work harder and cooperate, and people respond, right? They cooperate and they create these civilizations and, massive, intensive agriculture and all of that stuff, okay? So actually, you guys actually did pretty well. The marks on that were better than I thought. I thought this was a bit of a challenging quiz, but I was wrong. So I'll just have to make it more challenging next time. No? No? What's that? The first one was harder or easier?
Harder.
The first one was harder. Okay. Well, the first one's tough because you never know what to expect, right? And then after that you do. But I thought this was a tougher one. And
Yeah,
so,
I think so. Because I studied this from a lecture and the basic concept.
but you guys did better.
Only the concept.
You guys did better.
So total point 30 or
It's a lot.
Sorry?
the total point is
It's out of 12. Yeah, so I've changed it in here, and on Student Portal it'll be out of 12 as well.
So you get it.
And do you give a project time to increase our score?
Um, No, if there's an opportunity for that later, I'll let you know, but usually not.
Not yet.
Not usually, yeah. Maybe there'll be something later that we can do, but I'll see how it goes.
Maybe we can do some research about the lesson.
Maybe. Let me think about it. Okay, people. So that is all I have for you today. Pack it up. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll have Friday. All right. See you.